For bench camp, our camp for the night, would be a dry camp. Any water we would use, we would have to bring in ourselves. The 7-mile hike took us on some narrow but well-traveled trails. Day 7 saw us hike through this valley on our way to Baldi Mountain, which can be seen in the background. Our trip to Head of Dean Camp took us through Bear Canyon, one of the roughest, steepest, and hottest stretches of the trek. It was a true test of endurance and physical conditioning. The naps we had after arriving at Head of Dean were well earned. Our 8th day began with a hearty breakfast around the campfire. Morning hour temperatures rose rapidly at Philmont. After a quick change into cooler clothes, we were on our way. The 4.5-mile hike this morning would end at Miranda Camp. The hike was a tough one and seemed longer than what it really was. After our camp was made at Miranda, several of the crew members entertained themselves by creating a primitive teeter-totter. The theme at Miranda was the life of the mountain man. Crews tried their skills at both tomahawk throwing and knife throwing. Throws were made at cut logs nicknamed beaver cookies. The Miranda staff really understood the life of the mountain man. They practiced and lived what they preached.
Day 9. Baldi, here we come. The hike will begin from camp at an elevation of 8,800 feet and will peak at the highest of 12,441 feet, the top of Mount Baldi. The crew will descend down Baldi Mountain Historic Trail into French Henry Camp for a couple of demonstrations and then back to Miranda for the evening. Baldi Mountain. It was going to be an invigorating mile hike, uphill. Too bad the public transportation was out of order. Our first major stop of the day was at Baldi Camp, elevation 10,000 feet. The local trading post and museum of mining equipment were popular attractions at the camp. It was a tough, long climb to Baldi's Peak. Rest stops were often, but kept short. But it was all worthwhile when the summit was conquered. The view was breathtaking. Actually, it was the thin air that took our breath away. "We made it," was the crew's cheer after they caught their breath. Jerry and Jerry watched as Tony places a small figure of Elmer Fudd and a note from Melrose crew into a canister at the highest point on Baldi. On the way down the backside of Baldi, the crew discovered an old mine shaft which was immediately explored. At the Aztec gold mine, the crews listened to a staff member explain about the miner's lifestyle before a tour of the mine began. At French Henry Camp, the crew received a lesson on how panning for gold was really done. Several scouts tried their luck at panning, but after 15 minutes, all they had to show for their efforts was a few flakes of the yellow metal. French Henry also had a museum of equipment left behind when the mining companies left the area.
Day 10 on the trail. Today we'll be getting 2 burros to help carry the gear. But first we need to learn the proper way to pack a burro. Once they are packed, we are ready to move on. Today's hike is a 5.5-mile journey to the camp known as Plano. The first part of the trip was mostly uphill. But with the help of the burros, the trip was a bit easier. Why, even Tony was helped to cross the stream by one. Due to an afternoon shower, we received a chance to catch up on some sleep. We did not get to try the program offered at Plano Camp, but we did attend a stockholders meeting that evening. The gathering was more like a campfire than a meeting, and was a lot of fun to attend. Morning begins on our 11th and final day in the Philmont backcountry. And yes, the Burrows came along to make sure that we arrived at our next stop safely. The 7-mile hike will end at Baldi Camp, site of the original Philmont base camp. The trek was easy today, but it was full of switchbacks. A crew's favorite stop at Baldi is the trading post and cantina. Several interesting items were on display in the trading post, including various animal bones. The crew rested their bones in the cantina, where snacks and root beer were consumed like there was no tomorrow. It felt good to sit down at a table once again, especially when there's a poker game to be played. That evening was our last one at Philmont. Back in Tent City, all the crews that were leaving the next morning gathered for the closing campfire. The show was filled with fun songs and skits. Jokes were made of the food and the open-air latrines. Before it was over, memories were shared and our thoughts became more serious. The experience helped us to grow. Well, maybe not too much, but we did feel different, a bit more mature on our way home. Yeah, it was quite a trip, a beautiful wilderness experience, but it was sure nice to be back home, back to our loving families and our MTV. Should the Scouts of Melrose ever awaken to a Philmont sunrise again? Only time will tell.